Hey, how you doing? Haven't done one of these in a long time. Wanted to let you know I seem to have turned into an electronics player because I'm finding that all of those sounds that I wanted in my head, I really wasn't getting the full capability out of the kit, even though I love the way my kit sounds, but I wasn't getting the full capability of the certain sounds that I wanted all the time, especially that cymbal sound that eluded me for years. You hear that ping? I couldn't find it like that with this bell. Well, there's a reason for that. For me, this ping was from a heavy, and this bell was from a medium ride. And consequently, on the electronics, I can put the two together. And I think it works really pretty well. You know, you start hearing those really big toms that you can get, and that kick that lets you thump your brains out. Well, you could sort of get it all at one time in the acoustic kit, but you can't really change it. You know, I found out that when I wanted to play some Zeppelin, well, the kind of the jazz kit or the normal rock kit wasn't there. Or even, well, let me plug this in here. I got a thing with two rides. One on my cymbal and one on my left-hand tom. And China. And you know, it's not that the electronics are so great as far as just the sound goes, but the reason why I wanted to talk to you today about this is because there's an anomaly that I'm finding hard to deal with that really isn't on the acoustic kit that comes out of the electronic side. And something that I wanted to alert all of you electronic players, well, the guys who are playing electronics already know this, but future electronics players, at least to this stage. You know, one of the things that I've been finding out after talking to my sound engineers and guitar players and all these other electronics guys, keyboard players, is that they have had to deal with something for years that I've never really had to deal with before. And that is the sound that I hear coming out of this module. And I've been modeling sound now for about, 4 or 5 months, just trying to get the right particular sound that I've been looking for. And, I'm going to be starting to use these on stage, and I wanted to make sure they had that thunder that you always hear on those recordings. What I'm finding out is the sounds that I have in my module don't always transfer transparently to the outboard kit. There seems to be, when I first plugged my kit in, I've got my kit to sound all the kits, and I've got about 15 or 20 kits that I've been working with. I get them to sound really good through the headphones. And I thought, wow, these are going to sound like really great out front. Well, when I took the lines out and put them into our mixer for the front house system, it sounded virtually completely different. And I'm going, wait a minute. I've never had to deal with something that when I have it sound here acoustically, that it doesn't sound virtually just louder or enhanced out there. I found that my headphone, and then, by the way, I'm using a Roland module, and I think they're probably the best on the market. I'm using the TD12. What I found was that the sound was very bright here. So I kind of thought that if I took my board, my outboard send, and set it to flat, I would get the kind of the same thing. Flat setting means give me A equals B. Well, it wasn't the case. And what I was hearing at certain portions, something that was very tinny here with no low thunder. So I was having to take the EQs and shove them around and try to make them sound like what I wanted. And there's a big problem there in that when you have your sound that you're adjusting on your electronics, you're getting it to sound the way you want there. If you start adjusting EQs on the board, like say if you're playing out live, you have to remember you're EQing the entire drum kit, not just one specific instrument. So when you color the sound after it's already been input into another device, you're coloring the sound of the entire kit. Even if you have enough bottom end on your bass drum to shake the ground, all of a sudden your snare and your toms have additional bottom end for the sound that they are, which may not be what you're looking for. So the best place to get the sound that you want is right at the module. Now, that's the rub. I got my sound. I actually found, and I talked to a few people about this, and they say it can't possibly be happening, but I don't know why I'm hearing this. The headphone jack is a very bright sound on the Roland, very crisp, very clean. The outputs tend to be a little muddier as they go through the line. Now, this is something that drummers haven't had to worry about before other than amplification on mics. But the muddy sound that I was getting here was really transpiring. It was giving me more of a difficult, muddy kind of thump, but not the crispness that I was already hearing here in my headphones. And I'm going, well, wait a minute, what goes on? And then when I actually hooked the front main speakers into the board, they sounded kind of like Tinker Toys. And I went like, now, man, this is something that I really have never had to try to challenge myself with before. So I've been trying to come up with a scenario, and as specified from the guys on the V-Drum forum, the only way you're going to get, and this I'm passing on to you, the only way you're going to get the sound that you want out front is to first have your PA system set up and tuned the way you want the entire band to sound. That's the first thing. It has to be ready to go. Then listen to your drums through the actual mixer rather than out of the module. And then listen to the playback on the speakers that you get from the front system. It's kind of you have to kind of reverse engineer this whole process, because what sounds good here doesn't always translate across the way that it needs to be. Now, guitar players that I've been talking to knew this all along. One of my good friends was telling me, oh yeah, man, I'd have my amp sounded really, really good, and then I'd take the line out of that amp and it would sound completely different when going through the board. And see, that's something that I'm not used to as just an acoustic drum player. And believe me, back in the 80s, I used to use electronics, but they were more like sound effects rather than sounding drums. So we have come a long way in the actual sounds of how this works, but I will tell you that it has not come a long way with the way that we put it all together. If I found that out before time, I would have not done most of my modeling listening to just headphones. I'd have done most of my modeling coming out of the board and listening to it, and then finding out what was a good sound that would make the, like the bass drum thump your brains out to the live show rather than just the electronics. Which goes again also, have you ever tried to play an instrument that you really don't like the sound of, even though it sounds great out front? That goes against every concept that I've ever learned in playing drums. So I wouldn't think that that would be most pleasurable experience. So once you finally get your outboard kit going and sounding correctly, you need to get your monitor system sounding the exact same way. And sometimes that's an adventure as well, because there are a number of things that you're going to have to use. You're going to have to use EQs. You may have to have certain compressors on certain drums. You may put a ton of compression on here, because one of the things that you're going to find is that when you're using ambience on here, let's say in the drums, I have one of my settings, which is a ballad setting. An aggressive ballad setting sounds something like this. Nice and full when it records, but I have to tell you, even though I have the reverb and compression coming out through the board, it gets lost about 3 feet from the cabinets. So what you think is really happening isn't necessarily what's happening out front. Let me demonstrate a few of these kits, because I got to tell you, I wouldn't have any other thing right now to play on. I'm hopefully going to be doing this live, and I'm finding out really they are super in getting the exact sound that you're looking for. It's not easy getting there, but you can get it if you try. Let me play through some things for you. And you can go down the list forever, I have to tell you. Okay, so this really isn't a demonstration of the Roland drum kit, this discussion was more of, I think that if you plan on going this way, which I'm very glad I did, it's just going to take me a little bit to get used to. I think if you plan on going this way, you're going to have to leave a lot of time in order to be able to get comfortable with the sound that you're not only hearing here through your system, but what's going to be happening out there. Because this type system has lots of variables. I mean, this module alone, you can model mic position of drums and compression in and out. And I mean, there's so many variables here in the module. Imagine if you get it sounding so sweet and you think everything's going to work, and you put it out front and your sound engineer goes, "Oh my God, what'd you do?" That's not what we were going for. So I think what I'm trying to get across in this little segment is be prepared, use your ears, and try to get all of your ducks in a row before you start out on your electronic adventure. See you next time.